Well, it is 5 o'clock, and I believe on being prompt. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me just welcome you to Faith Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church. I am Reverend Dr. Joseph Ford, pastor here of this great church. Amen. Let's open up in a word of prayer, and then we'll go from there. Gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity, Lord, as we try to be good citizens, to be informed citizens. We pray now that you would just open up our minds, God, that we may hear, God, what is all entailed in this charter. God, we thank you now. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Let me first welcome each of these representatives, each of these panelists for coming and speaking on the panelists. And this was created because we wanted to make sure both sides was heard of what this charter would do. One of the things I will tell you, I was very disturbed to hear that something that would affect the city of Stamford for the next 10 years would be put on an election where only historically 19% of the population votes. If you don't think there's something wrong with that, that's the issue right there. But there are many issues on this ballot for this upcoming election. And for everything to be put into one up or down vote raises another concern as well. And so we want to hear what each section of this is about. And we have a great panel this evening that will discuss these sections. And we will be taking questions. If you have a question, we ask, as you walked in, there was a table with note cards. We ask that you write down your question and turn it in to either myself or one of the ladies in the back. At this time, without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator for today, Pastor Andre Bradley, who is the pastor of the Union Baptist Church, and he will be moderating. And then we're going to give an opportunity after he comes. We're going to give an opportunity for each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Pastor Bradley.
Good evening, everyone. One of the great challenges of any city is to create a sense of fairness for all. And sadly, those things are challenged, and not everybody leaves happy all of the time. And so tonight we want to, or this evening, and thanks to Dr. Ford and the Faith Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church for hosting this tonight and for each one of our panelists tonight, I think that this issue is extremely important, and I think it's one that should be talked about. So if you're viewing this online, share it with somebody that you know, because this does not just impact us in November, but it will impact us literally for the next 10 full years. And so tonight or today, what we want to do is we want to give these panelists an opportunity to be able to share with each one of them. We're glad that they are here tonight, and we're going to start to my immediate right here and work our way down this evening. And let's give them our attention as they share with us an opening statement.
Thank you, and thanks to all the sponsors, and thanks to Faith Tabernacle for having us here today. My name is Mary Fideli. I am the minority leader on the Board of Representatives, and I represent the District 17, which is in Springdale. I have been on the Board of Representatives for a lot of years, over 25 years, and I have been through, I believe this is my third charter revision, and there are some concerning things for me. I agree with Reverend about the two biggest concerns for me were the one question and the timing of it. And I think as we go through this evening, I'm happy to answer specifically why those two things in particular bother me. But I don't want to take up too much time in the opening, but those were specifically the two reasons why I voted no on the Board of Representatives on the charter revision vote. Sorry, I don't have to pass my mic.
Thank you for all being here, and I also want to thank Faith Tabernacle Church, Bradley, Hill, and Jackson for helping put this together. I currently serve as one of the deputy majority leaders of the Board of Representatives, and like Mary, this is a bipartisan concern. This is not a partisan issue across the city. My two largest concerns are, again, that this is on a ballot year when we had a choice to put it on a ballot year when 80% historically show up to vote. This year, 8%. In our pursuit of making sure that as many voters have an opportunity and historically do act on that opportunity to vote, knowing that 60% of the registered voters in Stamford would not come out this time, I think is disingenuous and frankly insulting. So I'll save more of my comments as the questions come in.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And for those of you watching at home, my name is Jonathan Jacobson. I'm a member of the Board of Representatives. I, too, have some serious concerns about the proposal that's on the ballot on November 7th. In addition to the concerns raised by my colleagues, the fact that it's all an up or down, all or nothing, yes or no vote, with literally hundreds of proposed changes, as is being advanced by the Charter Commission, puts us in a very difficult position. Because we are unable to sort through the proposals that perhaps we agree with those that we do not. And there are some proposals that are so concerning to me, specifically the matters relating to the appointments process, as well as the creation of a new separate and distinct law department, which gives me some grave concerns when I have to vote yes or no to all of the proposals. So I'm sure we'll be going into greater detail, but for now, that is my position. Those are my concerns.
Good evening. My name is Michael Hyman. I am a member of the Stamford Board of Education. I am obviously concerned about numerous items that are in this particular charter proposal. Some already mentioned by my fellow panelists, but the concern for me is the involvement of the community and knowing that we have an opportunity to speak and to give our voice and our opinion. This particular question does not allow that to happen. It's one question with 9 parts. And while some would suggest that that is okay to do, in a good democracy and in fairness, people have a chance to decide on the different issues that are placed before them and not simply throw them into a garbage bin of items to be presented to the public for an up or down vote. It is patently unfair, it's inappropriate, it's wrong, and it's deceitful in many ways, I feel. So you will hear more from other panelists tonight, but that is just my simple opinion in a nutshell.
I am very upset about some pieces of this, and I am deeply respectful of our citizens who volunteered their time to work on it. But I think that the community input piece was not sufficiently vetted. This is such a complex document that I think there should have been many community meetings on different sections to hear input from the community. I'm also a person who has spent my life working for people whose rights have not always been respected. And part of this charter allows landowners and now co-op owners to sign petitions. But many people in our city live in apartments. Many of the people I served lived in apartments. They cannot sign a petition. They too pay taxes. They may not get a tax bill, but the taxes are paid through their landlords, and that can be documented by the data on our tax receipts. Many of us know who the largest tax payer in the city is. It's BLT. So they do pay taxes, and I think it's just goes back to the 1700s when we first started our country and only white male property owners could vote. This kind of rule goes back to that kind of time in history. And in 2021, an enlightened society should not be entertaining that.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Richard Friedman. Thank you to the Reverends for arranging this panel for this evening. I'm the chairman of the Stamford Board of Finance. I'm going into my 9th year as chair. The Board of Finance has no official role in charter revision, but our board was involved at times, and given my experience in government, I was also on the Board of Education. I have a pretty deep understanding of how our government is structured, and I've certainly done my best to pick through all the changes. The red line version is 195 pages. It's preposterously complicated. I don't know how anyone could actually make heads or tails of the whole thing. I care very deeply about this city. I was born and raised here. And I'm particularly upset about the process that led us to this point. We really didn't need to get to this point. But I am quite disturbed about some of the changes in their substance. Jonathan Jacobson pointed out the two most problematic, which revolve around the appointments process and the ability for the Board of Reps to essentially have unlimited authority to hire outside counsel for just about any reason. And I'm obviously voting no. I'm urging everyone who I come in contact with to vote no, and I'm sure we'll get into the substance of these changes as we take questions from the audience.
Thank you to each one of you for your all's opening statements. As one reminder for those who are coming in and those who will view us online, that you can pick up a card if there is a question that you would like to raise. You can turn it into there are some people that are actually moving right now. So if you have a particular question and would like to ask that, please fill out the card. We want to be able to do it as decent and in order as we possibly can, and so that they'll be receiving it. If you do need a card tonight, will you just stretch up your hand if you have a question you'd like to raise? All right, and they are on their way. Wonderful, wonderful. They need some help. That's good. Wonderful. It is good to see that our citizens of our wonderful city, in whom I am not a lifelong Stamford, Connecticut person. I'm probably the newest that is in the sanctuary today with less than 2 years being here, but I do definitely see the value in such an arduous task of looking at the city's charter. That how do we go about moving Stamford in a positive way? Let me publicly say that there ought to be commendations to all of those who served to help to bring together this document, this city charter. Their work was probably painful and yet tireless, but we are still yet grateful nonetheless because of good Stamford is a Stamford that cares about her citizens collectively, and that we look out for each other collectively because we are each other's keepers. And that being said, it is definitely interesting and something that almost of an anomaly to see that there is such bipartisan support in this particular matter, and that it's good to have healthy debate or to raise questions on each side. But it is interesting to see this tonight, that how we see this come together. Let me ask this as they are preparing, as the questions prepare to come in. Might I raise myself, and any one or all might be able to chime in on this particular piece. But one of the things that is suggested that in this
city's charter, the new one, the proposed one, is that there will be an increase in taxes. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's a very distinct possibility. 10% of the city's grand list is, in other words, all of our taxable property is comprised of projects and developments and buildings that were built in the last 10 years. So our grand list is about $25 billion, more or less. So about $2.5 billion of that was constructed in the last 10 years. So that's actually larger than the grand list of many towns in Connecticut, just our growth in the last 10 years. So if that stops, so your taxes would be 10% higher were there no growth in the last 10 years, and there has not been a corresponding growth in the size of the city government or the school population. So that's to offset your taxes by roughly 10%. If that growth were to stop, which that's certainly a subtext of this whole process, is construction of housing, and how much housing are we going to construct, and that certainly will lead to an increase in your taxes over time.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a question. Question is, and anyone might be able to answer this, but what are the current requirements for Stamford residents to sign petitions? Renters versus owners.
So the current one is that only landowners can sign it. And my unreadiness is that if we are in the process of changing things, we ought to change them for the best. The other thing is that we talk about affordable housing in the city of Stamford. And the new charter allows people to mobilize in small groups to stop the vision of an inclusive Stamford. And I think that's dangerous to community, and I think it's harmful, and I think that Stamford needs to continue the work of producing more affordable housing in the city. And we need to talk about the misconceptions. One is that affordable housing somehow lowers the housing value of the community. That is absolutely not true. Data has not found that to be the case anywhere. Okay, so we have all these untruths being spread out to make people afraid of what may come. All of us are comfortable with what we're doing now, but we need to do better. And the answer to the question is that it's terrible what we're doing now in our charter, but let's not institutionalize it and make it worse. The worst case scenario for me is if we vote and we say yes, it's a done deal. If 6 months from now we look at it and say, oh, we made a mistake, too bad. If we say no, it goes to the drawing board, and every one of us gets a chance to change the parts that we don't like.
Would anybody else like to chime in on that?
Well, I would certainly want to follow up on Reverend Hill's remarks about the ability to chime in. This charter was brought forward to us by people who I know well, and I would consider many of them friends, and some of them I would certainly view as friends over a period of time with a high esteem for them. But at the same time, we did not get an opportunity to have a fuller discussion about the charter. And there were members of the commission that I certainly went to and said, we need more time. You've given us a report on a Thursday and said that there's going to be a public hearing on a Wednesday about a 185-page document. As a graduate student, if a professor had done that to me or to a group of students, we would have all challenged him. There would have been a January 6th with students on doing something like that. But that's what this group gave to us. Make up your minds, yes or no. we asked for more time to actually educate the public and inform them about the great work. If this committee believes that that's what they've done, the great work that they did, why not have that opportunity to educate and inform the public? And they said no to that. What they wanted was a debate and a rush to the polls. Now, that was a decision made by the Board of Representatives members, not by the commission itself. But in so doing, the devil is always in the details. And I'm mindful of the fact, pastors, that we are in a church. But the devil is, in fact, in the details. And the details about this 185 pages are such that it would curl your hair to believe what could happen. That we're creating possibilities that changes the game and does not necessarily allow individuals in this city to speak more forthrightly about what they need. If we're looking for affordable housing and how to build it, this does not get us there. In fact, it undermines that proposition that a few group of people in a certain part of town could say no to the development of such housing in certain places. You have to ask yourself, do we want to change the rules of the game or inspire the rules of the game in such a way that we give that type of power to a small group of organized people who claim that they're for diversity, who claim that they are for housing, affordable housing. Nevertheless, living in it sometimes and voting against it on others. The hypocrisy is just unbelievable.
All right. So let me ask this, and since we have moved Reverend Hyman in reference to affordable housing, how are the charter revisions going to affect affordable housing? What small groups are you talking about? How? I'm asking the question. So, as it's written, how are the charter revisions going to affect affordable housing?
So some of the people in the audience may know that in my private life, I run a family real estate company, and we own housing throughout the Northeast. We own housing in Stamford, and the Board of Reps Housing Committee actually recently asked for a study, or I'm sorry, for a report on all the housing that's been constructed in Stamford in the since 2015. That's available on the Board of Reps website. So I went and I looked at the report. There's been 650 units of affordable housing built in the last 10 years. If we define deeply affordable housing, which is not a term of art, it's really only used here in Stamford. If we define that as anything that's less than 50% of area median income, there were about 150 units of deeply affordable housing built in the last 8 years. Half of those were built by me, or were projects that were initiated by me. So I feel highly qualified to answer this question. It's very simple. The Charter Revision Commission was comprised of, depending on your count, between 9 and 10 members who have a history of opposing housing and development in the city. So that was a critical focus of the Charter Revision Commission. Many of the provisions that they had put in are no longer there. But there is a key provision that is still there, and that's the ability to stall the appointments process and control appointments to the land use boards. And I think it's fairly clear, based on the history of the Board of Representatives as it's constituted right now, that they will stop development in the city. And specifically, let's be clear, development in Stamford is almost exclusively housing. So the Board of Representatives, at least the majority of the Board of Representatives right now, is anti-housing. The Charter Revision proposed are anti-housing. And what disturbs me is that there's a lot of rhetoric. We're not anti-housing. We're in favor of deeply affordable housing. And this is a common tactic in housing. I've built a lot of affordable housing in other towns besides Stamford. This is a very common tactic by opponents of housing to say that they support it as a way of inoculating themselves, because to say that you're opposed to it is not acceptable. That's not socially acceptable in this day and age, to say that you're against housing. So you use rhetoric that makes it look like you're in favor of it, when in fact you're against it. Every action of the Board of Representatives in the last few years, there's many of them, I could cite chapter and verse, anything that involves housing has been voted down. So it's very clear to me that if the charter revision passes, the zoning board and the planning board will eventually be constituted with people who will vote no on all housing projects, or effectively all housing projects.
Someone else like to chime in?
Well, this week, an announcement came out that the President of the United States has looked at the housing crisis across the entire country and has made a decision that there are office spaces all across the country that are empty now because people are working from home. And there's a proposal to release billions of dollars to refit commercial space for apartments. And a city like Stamford should be ready for that. And not too long ago, I was corrected in a Board of Reps meeting, which was not in person. They don't meet in person. They meet on Zoom, and often their faces are not shown, which I think is a transparency issue. But I was corrected by one of the Board of Reps people after I had my period to talk and could not talk again, that he had never seen a person in Stamford sleeping in a car because they were homeless. He's a police officer, so I feel sorry that he never saw anybody like that. It's interesting that preachers, firemen, and other people find homeless people all over the city, but some people can't see them. So it's important for us as people of goodwill and just moral people to create some opportunities for housing for people. And if we have a constitution in place that prohibits that, and all of a sudden all of this money becomes available to deal with some of our empty space, and we're not in a position to take care of it. But the real concern is, it's a yes, it's an up and down vote. If you vote yes, that's the last chance you get. If you vote no, you get another chance. The meeting that Reverend Hyman talked about, the one meeting that we came out to, the one meeting where we discussed this, 90% of the people who came to the meeting were opposed to it. The next day I was told that they got twice as many emails that night in favor of it. That is not democracy. We can't keep doing things quietly. I don't know if somebody got on the phone and told everybody who was their first cousin to send an email in position in favor of it. I don't know what happened. It was not transparent, and we need transparency in government.
Richard touched on how the appointments process can affect housing. So let's talk briefly for a moment about what the current appointments process is. The executive branch and the legislative branch, just like we have set up at the state level and the federal level, the executive has the right to and the privilege to nominate, and the legislature can check the executive by either confirming or denying that appointment. Right now, the mayor has 120 days to send a nomination down. If that doesn't happen after the 120 days, the authority, the sole authority to nominate falls to the Board of Representatives president. After another 120 days, the power reverts back to the executive, both having had an equal bite at the apple. What is proposed expands the mayor's authority to nominate into the period of time where the Board of Representatives president has the authority. But we are already seeing situations where, for example, let's say the mayor sends down an appointment and the Board of Reps president, who may be at odds with the executive branch, also nominates. You could easily see the mayor's nominee getting short shrift at that point. But the more dangerous change is that after the second 120 days, the power does not revert to the executive. It is passed then to the entire board of the 40 of us on the Board of Reps, where it remains permanently for that appointment. So the mayor only has exclusive nominating power for 120 days, and the exclusivity is then gone thereafter. I think that upsets checks and balances completely. One of the checks that, as I said, the legislature has on appointments is to deny a mayoral nominee confirmation. One of the checks that the executive has on the legislature is if they see a legislature that is not cooperative, they don't have to send a nominee. I am as concerned about holdover appointments as anyone. On this, I agree. However, under state law, we cannot remove someone from a position if it has expired. Judges have ruled many times that they don't want municipalities to come to a grinding halt because their boards and commissions can't achieve a quorum and do any business. Our charter currently says that expired appointees stay in their position until they're replaced. So the way it works now, checks and balances are firmly in place. If we don't have a mayor that's doing their job, the remedy is at the ballot box. If we don't have a Board of Reps president doing their job, the remedy is get a new board president, and all it takes is the Board of Representatives to act. The remedies for this problem are still there. It doesn't belong in the charter. It belongs in our actions as we move forward.
If I can just also add to that, applying those concerns to what we're actually voting on. One of the issues, in addition to it being in a year that's inconsistent with the language of the charter, and in addition to being a single up or down, yes or no vote, the language here is misleading at best. So as it relates to the issue of appointments, I'm going to read directly from it. E, end the practice of allowing members of decision-making boards and commissions to remain in office beyond the expiration of their term. Guys, that's not what's being proposed here. It's not ending the practice. It's proposing a solution to address the problem. But as Representative Morrison just indicated, the solution is far worse than the disease that it's trying to cure. There's a reason why our founding fathers wanted to have the executive branch nomination with the legislature confirming. There are significant policy considerations as to why a legislature like the Board of Representatives should not have the ability to nominate candidates, especially after they've had the opportunity to hold or vote down those candidates. An apples-to-apples comparison would be if there was a vacancy on the United States Supreme Court and the president submits a nominee to that vacancy, and the Senate, potentially of a different political party, not just votes down that candidate, but after a set period of time says, okay, now we get the power to submit a nominee of our own. There's a reason why, since our country's founding, that policy has been considered a bad idea. I am not aware of any other system of government, state or local, that grants the legislature that type of power. And I do not believe it's appropriate for Stamford, Connecticut to be the experiment.
And if I can just give one quick additional item. As a Republican, I am in the minority on the board. There's 36 Democrats and 4 Republicans. As the minority in this, the way that the charter is being proposed, this change, I don't think the Republicans are going to get a fair shake. I don't really think the unaffiliated voters are going to get a fair shake. Right now, how it works is the RTC and the Republican Town Committee and the Democratic City Committee can give their names to the mayor's office. The mayor can then put names through to the Board of Representatives. We also, in the last board, put through an appointments committee. This also gives a venue for unaffiliated voters to put their names forward. It also gives another venue for Republicans and Democrats who aren't affiliated with their parties to get their names forward. That's not going to happen in this new process, and I think that really stymies the minority parties of getting their voices heard and getting their names put forward for boards and commissions.
Let me just add one more thing to it. Going back to the appointments process, currently, as I said, the mayor has the sole authority to nominate for the first 120 days. If the mayor fails to send a nominee, fine. After 120 days, the power shifts to the board president. Under the new proposal, the 120 days will lapse if the mayor doesn't just not send a nominee, but if the nominees are voted down. So it presents a new opportunity, codified into the city's constitution, for the Board of Representatives to run out the clock on the executive branch by simply voting down everyone the mayor sends, and after 120 days, assuming authority. We're actually seeing this happening in real time as we speak. The mayor, with concern and hearing about the concern for expired terms and vacancies that need to be filled, the mayor sent down 2 nominees in the last 3 months, one to fill a vacancy, one to fill an expired term on the zoning board, the very board that is one of the very boards that is of great concern at the moment. The first gentleman was voted down, even though he was qualified, because folks on the board wanted a different candidate, a young woman who serves currently as an alternate member of the zoning board. She actually has been voting and serving as an active member because there's a vacancy. This was an attempt to fill it, just as the concern is. But this person was denied because our board wanted a different candidate. So there's one example of running out the clock. This month, another woman was put forward. Oh, one of the concerns with that was stated for the first gentleman was the alternate is a woman of color. And minority representation was stated as one of the key reasons that the board wanted this candidate. The next nominee the mayor sent down is also a woman of color. Her nomination was held. They wouldn't even have the interview. The reason given is there was a conflict of interest. True, you cannot serve on the Board of Representatives and the zoning board at the same time. It's a conflict. But our current charter prevents that from happening legally, even if you wanted to. Representative Shin's term on the board ends on November 30th. She couldn't be sworn into the board of the zoning board until after December 1st, if confirmed. Even with that concern, that conflict concern explained and supported by the chair of the appointments committee, they still held the nomination. This new section will allow running out the clock on the executive so the Board of Reps, the legislature, can take further and permanent control of a given nomination. And that is much too much power. As a member of that board, I don't want us to have that power.
All right. Listen, so we've got some wonderful dialogue that people want to go, because there's some questions that are raised, so we're going to do it. We want to be able to answer it as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. So these are 2 individual questions, but I think that they go together. The question is that why, and I think somebody touched on it earlier, but why is the vote only 1 question, and why is there no subcategories presented as a question? The second, so it's actually 3. The last part is that why can't this go on the ballot next year and broken down into several questions? So the question by and large is that, real simple, why is the vote literally only one question? And you all are not necessarily mind readers, and so you're giving your best educated guesses. Why is it into one question only with all of those subparts? And then two, why can't it go on the ballot next year and broken down? Is there some reason?
So if you go back through 40 years of charter revision history, back to the early 80s, other than one charter revision, which was done to clean up some inconsistencies from the prior one, where there were two individual questions on the ballot, both of which passed, every major charter revision going back 40 years has had anywhere from 7 to 10 individual yes or no questions on which we as voters can choose. They all came with explanations. In fact, the 2002 revision, the 16th charter revision, it came with rationale, pros, and cons right there on the ballot or accompanying the ballot. So we had as much information as possible at the time. This time, putting it all, and there are 9 pieces this time, is a break with trend, tradition. It's a break with transparency, in my opinion. To put 9 points in one question, giving us no opportunity to pick and choose what we like. And there are things contained in this question that I would vote for, but I think the damage that could be done far outweighs the good. And we did fight for breaking it into individual questions, changing the wording to be less vague. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
I think the Reverend wanted a simple answer. So the answer is yes, it could have been multiple questions. The board made a motion for separate questions and it was voted down. And yes, the question could have been put in 2024. It was a motion that the board made and it was voted down. So both could have been done. The Charter Commission reported to us in its report that they wanted one question and they wanted it in 2023. Oh, actually, the Board of Representatives has the power to set the date, not the Commission. But the Commission came to us with one question. We tried to change it into multiple questions and into 2024, and it failed.
One of the easier answers on this is from Representative Nina Sherwood. A couple of weeks ago at the Ferguson Library, she said that the reason for one question is that there was not a structural change that was being proposed in the charter. So since there were not structured changes happening, there could be, yes, that is what she said, that since there was not a structured change being made to the charter, one simple question would suffice. But then later in that meeting, when someone questioned her on that, she said, well, no, there are big issues that are to be decided and that the public needs this to happen this year as opposed to next year. So either this is a structured change, which I think most of us believe, that the charter suggestions that have been proposed are major structural items, and it needs to be vetted properly, and we can have that time over a year's period of time to have those conversations with the public, or it's not really a no-brainer. And so we should have one question, as Majority Leader Sherwood says, with 9 parts to it. But others are calling BS on that.
One of the other things that was raised by the Majority Leader, Ms. Sherwood, was that the charter is so, quote, deeply flawed that we cannot wait another year. It needs to be done in 2023. Now, the charter itself says that the Board of Representatives shall endeavor to put it on 3 out of 4 election years. The one year you're not supposed to do it just happens to be this one. Our law department advised us that putting it on the ballot this year would be illegal, but the majority of the board felt that that language in the charter is merely preferential. But even putting that aside, even assuming it's preferential
and not legal, it's still the explicit guidelines and the intention of the framers of our charter of when we want to have this vote, when there is a period of maximum voter turnout, when there's opportunity to digest and analyze what's been presented. And I note that of all of the proposed changes that the Charter Commission sent out, one of the sections that was untouched was this one. So inherent in that analysis, at least to me, is that the Charter Commission agrees that this should be on a major year in 2024. But again, that was deemed to not be the case by the majority of the board. There was an attempt to put it on in 2024, consistent with the intention of the charter, if not the mandates. But because it's so deeply flawed, but also I guess contains structural changes at the same time only, we're in the position that we are now.
I think this leads to a kind of a good segue, because we were talking about a person who's actually technically not here, or at least I don't see. And so there's a question that was raised. It says that I was at the NAACP meeting at the Ferguson, and someone asked why there was, if the no proponents were asked to participate. The answer, no, because they wanted only their side and the panel. The question is, it's two, so hear me. Number one, is this true? And number two, will there be a future debate?
There were two one-sided presentations at the Ferguson Library in the past few weeks. The first one was a panel of 6, and in the weeks prior to that, we did ask several times if we could participate and have something of a balanced panel. And we were told no, several times. We did attend that session, as did Reverend Ford, and we were told that the night of October 26th would be held for our own panel. What happened then was I received a call inviting myself and Representative Jacobson to participate in a panel that at that point was 5 proponents and the 2 of us as opponents of the charter change. The person with whom I was talking was kind enough to negotiate down, and so we arrived at 3 and 3 to make it more balanced. We did ask again if we could have our own panel to balance the one-sided panel of the previous week. But what happened at that point was we were asked for who our panelists would be, and we presented 3 names. We were told we could not have one of those names. It just wasn't going to be permitted. I was also told by this person that they were being told that they were being bullied. Now, I found that heartbreaking because that's not in my nature, and I profusely apologized and asked if we could please request our own 3 panelists to represent our voice. We were again told no. It was only at that point we declined to participate, and is one of the reasons we're here tonight.
All right. Well, so one of the things that seems to struggle, or one of the great questions that is always arising, is this piece of affordable housing, deeply affordable housing. So here's the question: does affordable housing cause an increase in the mill rate? Does affordable housing cause homeowners an increase in taxes to make up the difference?
Absolutely not. If you build affordable housing, they pay taxes too. It's not, I mean, the deals are put together, and Richard can talk about it more, but I was at the dedication of the buildings named after Mayor Martin in Springdale. The United Methodist Church was a part of that in terms of making land affordable. A foundation gave some money. There were some tax credits, but the property is still taxable, and it does not increase your taxes. What increases your taxes is when we have people sleeping in our parks, and we have other problems like that that we have to really figure out how to manage. And one of the things that happens in life that's ironic is that if my family's the only family that's well sheltered, my family's the only family that has a good diet, my family's the only family that has good exercise and good medical care, and my family goes to schools with children who have that denied, then my children catch the diseases that I was trying to keep them from catching because nobody cared for the least among us. And it's important for us as Americans to take care of not just those who have, but to provide for those who are still trying to make their way up. Many of us can remember when our families did not live in the comfort we live in today. Somebody gave a helping hand. Somebody helped us up. That's all we're asking for, is that we continue to do what we've done in the United States.
So just so that we're clear that according to the person's question, that there will be no increase in tax.
No, taxes get increased all the time. But the taxes will not be increased because an affordable housing unit is put in your community. The people on the west side don't pay any more, they don't pay a higher mill rate than the people in North Stamford.
All right. A little lighter of a question. How does this charter revision compare to prior ones? Don't everybody jump up at once.
I'm just thinking. No, I'm just thinking in my head. This one is definitely different because of the one question. That's a big, huge difference. And also, the main difference, this one is because it's not during a mayoral or governor or presidential election. I think those are the two main differences for me. I mean, if you look back at the prior charters, I believe it was the going way back to the Malazzi Commission. I mean, that commission changed the way the government looks. I mean, they made the huge mega departments, and it changed the tenure of the mayor to 4 years. You know, last year, or the prior charter 10 years ago, in the Sandak Commission, was when we merged the fire departments, and it was in a single question. Can you imagine if this was the way it was done 10 years ago, and it was one question, and with 10 different points, and that's how we determined whether Stamford's fire department and volunteer department were combined? It's just, to me, it's a major difference in how I've looked and been a part of all the three different charter revision commissions. It's never been a one question. It's always been individual questions with explanation in them, or pros and cons. So if somebody picked up their ballot, it's just not this. You can't even. It's very hard to read, and it's one item. And if they go to the polls and it's the first time they've ever seen it, they're going to get the 7-page explanatory language, which is difficult also, and it's not easy to read. In the past, it's been a question with items listed underneath to help the person understand what the question is about. So to me, those are the major differences.
I would also add that when you review the actual language on the ballot in the past years, there's actual specific language of what is actually being proposed. Shall the charter be amended to allow the fire department structure to be reorganized, volunteer, absorbed, as the case may be? What do we have here? I'm just going to start at A. Create more opportunities for the public to participate in government. What the heck does that mean? It reads like an advertisement. It is specifically designed to be easily digestible and easily approved in a single yes or no question. And I think an informed and educated voter should ask themselves, why is that happening? Why is it being presented to us this way? And why is this happening in a year that's inconsistent with the language of the charter? And I should also note that the entire scope of this doesn't even encompass, the language on the ballot doesn't even encompass all the changes that are proposed by the commission. There's no language regarding to pension plans that's being altered here. There's no discussion about giving compensation for acting mayor in the first 30 days, which is, I think, the president of the Board of Representatives. Nothing in here about the Board of Representatives being able to hire professionals and experts separately from attorneys. The list goes on and on. It's not even a complete list. If it's not complete, it's not accurate. If it's not accurate, I can't trust it. And if I can't trust it, I can't vote for it. The charter is 190 some odd pages at this point, and 117 of those pages are full of red line. And we have one yes or no vote. My, sarcastically he says, favorite item among A through I in this single question is G, which reads, allow the Board of Representatives to obtain legal services as necessary, as do other local legislative bodies in Connecticut. It sounds very reasonable, and if it was its own question, it seems as though it implies that we don't have that permission at this point, and we're asking for it. What the question is not saying is that we already have that permission. In fact, we as a board have availed ourselves of it twice in the last few years. It's also not speaking at all to the structural change about the thresholds we must meet as a board to hire outside counsel. Right now, it takes first a concurrence of the board president, clerk, majority, and minority leader before a vote of the board can even happen. If one says no, it stops right there. And this was put in a charter revision of about 30 years ago to protect the minority party from potential legal abuse by the majority party. Both leaders have to concur. It's not telling you that this concurrence is being stripped, gone. It's also not telling you that if all four leaders concur, it takes a hard 31 votes to approve hiring outside counsel. The question is also not telling you that that is being reduced to a simple majority of those present and voting, which could be as few as 11. It's also not saying that it will empower us to hire our own legal staff. You can add up the numbers. If we have one attorney paid at the level that's been proposed, plus the overhead for the city, employee cost, around $250,000 a year for one attorney. Now, let's say you've got a case that requires more attorneys, more staff. It climbs and climbs. I will also submit that unless you expect or even plan to be at odds with city corporate counsel on a regular basis, why is the process we currently have not good enough, as we have easily availed ourselves of it recently? And the question is just so apple pie, it doesn't say any of the above. And why the language was crafted exactly that way is to deceive and bury the lead. And I find it wholly insulting as a voter here in Stamford.
Quickly, the idea that we have this one question here in front of us, as we said before, it's about deception. We all in this room, I would imagine, say that we love moms. We all in this room would say that we love liberty. But if I add those two things together, Moms for Liberty, there's another side of that if you're not familiar with that group. That while I may love moms and I may love liberty, I do not find that particular organization, Moms for Liberty, anything but despicable. I find this type of question in a democracy, one question in 9 parts, truly a despicable act to place upon the public. I've voted in 3 different sessions on the charters here in Stamford. The difference in this particular case is that I have agina over this particular document that I never had over the others. That's simply it. they've done this to deceive us and to wrap this thing together. The rush to the vote is simply because someone believes that they can win. That's it. Those who are declaring that they want to lift the voices of everyone is saying, let's do it while 19 or 20% of the people are involved in it. How ironic to do that. How ironic to actually put forward a question like that when we know that 80% of the people may be here for the next election and that we can, believe it or not, I trust, unlike Ms. Sherwood, I trust that the people can, in fact, understand each and every one of these questions. If I like 2, 4, and 7, why shouldn't I be able to vote for those and vote no on the others? That's a simple question, and the Board of Reps and those who voted for this single question have to answer for this. Will we be able to do that during this hot time of challenge of yes, no? The idea is that there's no debate, which Representative Bucas and Sherwood have requested in the newspaper to say, let's have a debate to inform the public. They had that chance back in May to do that. When over 100 of us came and said, let's delay this and let's have those conversations. They had that chance when they voted on a single question. They had that chance to decide on when to do this earlier this year. And now they come at this last hour saying, let's have a debate with the mayor and some others about it. No one's paying attention to that. Let's go back and do this right. Say no now, and let's go back with the second bite of the apple and talk through this information.
And I think that we're living in an era when there's a breeze of anti-democracy blowing in our land. This allows a small group of people to make tremendous decisions. 20 years ago, when the Board of Reps met and the community came out and the community took a position, the Board of Reps was sensitive to it. Right now, the community can come out and say what they want to say, and then they close the discussion down and do whatever they plan to do before they went out. And again, the devil is in the details. Some people who are voting only get 200 votes from their district, but their influence spreads across the entire city. People who live in one community can go to another community and protest what that community wants to do, or promote something in that community that the community may not want, if this charter is revised the way that is suggested. I think that in a society like the one in which we live, we need to take time to have a community discussion and to answer the question you asked, Reverend Bradley. It can be put on the vote next year. And the only way we can put it on the vote next year is to say no this year. If we say yes this year, that we're going to live with this for 10 years. And if 3 years from now you look up and say, oh, I didn't realize that was in there, too bad. But if you say no, it can give us 12 months to look at everything in detail and have public input in a public meeting and not have private emails determine how it's resolved.
Yeah. If this initiative does not pass, the charter stays exactly as it is now, and the next mandatory revision is 10 years from now. A charter revision can be initiated prior to 10 years, but it's not automatic. It takes tolerances. There are certain vote thresholds that have to be met. It would take, I believe, 10,000 signatures from the public, and it's a 2-year process. So if it's voted down, it's possible that a new charter revision process will be initiated by those who feel they didn't succeed. If yes wins the day, the majority of the board is not going to vote to overturn its own work and victory.
All right. Well,
I
said it was a simple question. Let me try another. There have been several references to, quote, a majority of the Board of Reps having turned down what sounds like democratic issues. Who is this, quote, majority, and why is this happening?
Yeah, I could be the politician here, but the answer is reform Stamford. That's the answer. The fact of the matter is that there are a group of individuals that are currently comprised of the majority of the Board of Representatives that believe that the city needs to be reformed. In my view, some, if not most of these folks are politically opposed to the direction of our city for the last 5 or 10 years. The candidates that they've supported, or perhaps the candidates that got elected, were not the ones that shared a vision that they had. And the way that our government is structured is such that, well, if you have a problem with the executive and the course of the city, well, you go to the voting booth and you vote for a new executive. And, well, I think that there are folks that got frustrated with the outcome of the executive, and I see that there has been an influx of those minds in down-ballot races, in down-ballot offices, like the Board of Representatives, that now are in a position where rather than advance and promote the policy initiatives that they support at the voting booth, they're trying to change the rules of the game at a point in time when statistically most of the city isn't looking. So that's how most of these Board of Representatives folks, I think, have gotten into the position that they're in, and why we're in the circumstances that we are, and why we're in a situation where a board of 40, 36 of which are Democrats, is so diametrically opposed to the Democratic mayor.
Oh, okay. Well, that was simpler than I anticipated. And so this is a good question because it seems that there is some opposition between Board of Reps and the mayor. And so here's a question. Does the panel believe that the mayor should follow the law? When the mayor does not follow the law, as she has not, where the appointments process is concerned, why are you concerned about the revision trying to correct that?
First of all, the mayor has followed the process. The mayor is not breaking the process. I'm a witness.
I was just reading the question.
I know, but the mayor created a new position and hired me, and the Board of Reps resoundingly said no. I do not work for the city. She respected the decision of the Board of Representatives. So that's not factual.
Anyone else want to?
You know, this narrative here that the mayor has not followed the law is really quite interesting. I believe, as Reverend Hill has said, that the mayor has in fact followed the law. The issue on appointments for the city of Stamford did not arrive here when Caroline Simmons became mayor. It was here through Pavia. It was here through Dan Malloy. And it's been a part of that New England thing of volunteers getting involved with the different boards. Can we change that system? Can we reach out to more people in this town to suggest that we need their help on filling boards and commissions? They're absolutely right. But to suggest that the mayor is somehow breaking the law or the established traditions of what has happened, or the state law that requires that someone sit in a position until we find a replacement, we all have the opportunity to press forward, to suggest to the mayor and to others nominees for any particular board there is in this town. We don't need a charter change to do that, but we need to make sure that leaders within our Board of Reps, within the executive, and other boards actually start to look around and figure out how do we make that part of it happen. But we've created a draconian measure in the charter change that have been suggested to resolve a problem that we always had the power to do something about. And to lay that at the door of this particular mayor and claim that there's some crime that has been committed is treasonable itself to just say that. It's not. She has not done that.
This mayor has, per the charter requirements, sent nominees down. They get confirmed, they get denied. We can't remove anyone from expired seats. She can nominate people to fill vacancies. If the board turns them down, the law says they remain in place. This question on the ballot says end the practice, as Representative Jacobson said. We can't end the practice because it's state law. We can change how we handle and act upon nominations. So no, the mayor has not broken the law with how nominations are being handled.
All right. So here we go. Since we're talking about appointments and holdovers, here's a question. How many holdovers are there currently on the zoning board? Then the second part is that on that of the planning board.
I'll take, respectfully do not know the exact number. I think there's 2 or 3 on the zoning board. I want to say two or 5. 5. On the zoning board? Okay, 5.
Yeah, so the question is, and if anyone knows from the panel, how many holdovers are there currently on the zoning board? Question. On the planning board? Question. Then there's a last piece to this. Is the chairperson on the zoning board a holdover?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
The mayor makes nominations to these boards, as was shared earlier. 2 nominations went before the zoning board recently. They both were not voted in. So yeah, there's some openings on our commissions, but it's not just the mayor failing to make a nomination. It's a process which will be more deeply entrenched and institutionalized if this revision is passed. It'll get worse and not better.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for everyone on the panel, but I probably do when I say that we all agree that the holdover problem is a problem. But the solution that's been proposed is it's a fundamental change in the balance of power. There were other solutions that could have been considered. They weren't. So what's been proposed, as I think Representative Jacobson said, the cure is far worse than the disease. And it does alter the balance of power fundamentally in our city government.
Okay, so it seems like appointments is an issue and housing seems to be such a big buzzword, which is extremely important, even for me. So here's a question. Person writes, I'd like to follow up on the question answer about the anti-housing sentiment on the Board of Reps. How do you explain that given the makeup of the board? That seems counterintuitive. Can you help me understand that?
Sure. Let's take a recent example. The Blickensdorfer typewriter factory in South End is owned by a very large and unpopular developer here in town. They applied for a grant from the state over 5 years ago. They had to apply through the city because that's what the state required. This grant was to pay for what was estimated to be 10% of the cleanup necessary for the brownfield condition that exists there. This project was to bring 1,000 units of housing to this site. Our board, when all we needed to do was appropriate the money, because it came through this year, all we had to do was vote to pass it through, because it was a grant, not Stamford taxpayer money. This $950,000 grant from the state was denied by this board. What wasn't widely publicized, but is critical to know and is relevant to this question, BMR requires that below market rates for rent.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Normally you have to reserve 10% for below market rate. By applying for this grant, you also have the option to buy your way out of the on-site requirement by paying a fee in lieu of having it there. You pay into the Stamford Affordable Housing Trust, which then would take developers to actually build something to provide that housing. So it's a contradiction there to say you're against housing, but you want it built, but you don't want anything built. But I digress. This grant would have required not 10%, but 12% affordable housing. It would further have removed the ability for this developer to buy their way out of it. By simply moving the grant through from the state, 120 affordable housing units would have appeared on this site. And because this builder is not popular, the sentiment was, we don't want to save them any money. And the grant was turned down and the money sent back to Hartford. So if we're in favor of and champions of affordable housing and reasonable growth, why, given the reason this money was turned down and what it would have done at no cost to Stamford taxpayers, why was it turned down? And that's my rhetorical question.
Reverend, you had asked, the question presented was, based on the composition of this current board, how do you explain the sentiment and the explanation that the current board of representatives is anti-affordable housing? As my mom would tell me growing up, the proof is in the pudding. Look at how people are voting. I voted for every opportunity I got the last 3 years for affordable housing. That can't be said for a lot, if not the majority of this board. And it's different excuses every time. Representative Morrison brought up one example. There have been several. Glenbrook's Community Center, text change to make the office parks, the vacant office parks into condominiums. The excuses to justify voting against it varied. Some argued that the affordable housing was not affordable enough. Others argued that I don't want people from out of town to move in because my priority, my only care are the people that actually live here. Some argued that the affordable housing figures were not actually affordable because those particular representatives couldn't themselves afford to live there. The excuses were diverse, the result the same, a no vote. That is the only metric that you need. That's the only one that we have. And that's the only way that politicians should be held accountable at the voting booth, not in changing the rules of the game.
So, anybody else want to before I move to the next question? Okay. Here's a question, since we're talking yet again about housing. How many units were built between 2015 to 2023 that would be considered not affordable or deeply affordable housing? I think I have some, that's
there
the
were
question.
I can answer that. There were about 3,500 units, somewhere between 32 and 3,500 units of housing constructed in the last 8 years. As I mentioned earlier, about 650 of those were affordable, and about, of those 650, about 150 were, I think, what people would classify as deeply affordable. So that's about, if I have my math right, that's about 2,700 units of market housing. So market housing is important too, right? If you expand the supply, you hold down the price. If you choke off increases in the supply, the price will go up. It's pretty predictable. It's basic economics. New Rochelle, for example, has built a lot of market housing in recent years, and their rents have gone up more slowly, I believe, than any community in the whole greater New York metro region. So the other point is that the market units are necessary to get the affordable units. units. With no market units, you get no affordable units. You get no what we would classify as moderate affordable units, and you also will get no deeply affordable units. You will get nothing at all, which will have multiple effects, right? As I said, it constricts the supply, drives up everyone's costs of housing, regardless of what kind of unit they're in, market or affordable, and it will also choke off any increase in the supply of dedicated affordable housing.
Yeah, and in many cities, traditional affordable housing is being eliminated with nothing to replace it. Last week, Charter Oaks had a special celebration for the property on Lawn Avenue that is still there, revitalized. People are living there, and units are deeply affordable. They're in the process of doing the same thing in the Cove. So Stamford has to have two legs to walk on. One is the development of new housing. The other one is the remodeling and upgrading of existing housing for people who live in subsidized apartments. The Martin Luther King building right now is going through some renovations through the new neighborhood program. Coleman Towers, which has been a nightmare in some ways, but they have also saved the building. The building was scheduled really to be closed and to go into forfeiture. So the city, we don't always succeed, but we try hard and we try to get it lined up. These are extremely complex issues. 50 years ago, 70 years ago, HUD gave money to build apartments that people could live in for 30% of their income. That is gone forever. We have to come up with more creative ways to do it, and we need the tools to do it. And with a restrictive constitution like the one that's being proposed, it makes it more difficult and more challenging to do.
Okay. So since we're still here on housing, there's a question about the apartments that are built along Washington Boulevard, Atlantic, and Pacific Streets. Question are they affordable? From the panel, thank you.
I'm not sure exactly what I assume there's references to a new building that was built on Washington Boulevard, across the street from the Government Center, the Smith. There's another building next to that. Well, no, it's so the building next to it actually is a pretty interesting story, because the building next to it met its affordability requirements through fee in lieu, which is the payment of funds instead of constructing the affordable units on site. The requirement for the affordable units on site in that building was about 23. Instead, fee in lieu was paid, and Franklin Apartments was constructed in large part with that fee in lieu, and it's 53 units of deeply affordable housing, not 25 units of affordable housing. So actually, ultimately, in the end, that building met its requirement by double. Every building in Stamford that's over 10 units has 10%, has a requirement for 10% affordable units, or more in some cases, but every building in Stamford over 10 units has a requirement for 10% affordability.
The questions about affordable housing, which seem to be coming up here, we were here to talk about the charter and how that is impacting us, but I will chime in on affordable housing. One thing that seems to be apparent is that we have become creatures who are dependent upon developers to give us the 10% to build affordable housing. And in that particular instance, we have to start thinking about, is that enough to actually make this happen in our city, where the affordability of housing for, whether it's deeply affordable or for individuals below the median income, whether that actual model works. To be dependent upon developers to make that happen, in years past in this country, as Reverend Hill alluded to, affordable housing was something, a creature of the federal government in many different ways. Many of us, or others of us, our parents, others, came into housing because of VHA and FHA and mortgage-backed loans and the ability to write off our mortgage interest rates. That's government support and subsidies of making that happen. When that stuff goes away for truly affordable housing, and it doesn't exist, cities like ours are looking at 10% or 12% or 15% or whatever the Board of Reps thinks is appropriate as a set-aside, as a way of fixing the problem. The fact of the matter is, for the long term, that will not fix the problem of affordable housing here. We're dependent on something that does not resolve our issues, and maybe at another time we should have a discussion, true discussion, about what it is that's necessary to actually challenge and manage the affordability of housing for all of our residents in the city. But it can't be done with just 10%, and it can't be done through the charter. The charter can certainly encourage or discourage that from happening. And our local government should be a part of making that happen, but we should be looking to Hartford, and we should also be looking to Washington. But that's just my commercial commentary about that.
Well, one of the things I think we have to put on the table, I think that it's important for us to have the tools to develop affordable housing. And, you know, there's always a question of whether there's enough of it. But right now, in the city of Stamford, I live in Glenbrook, and when I walk down the street to take a walk, past small wooden frame houses, I see numerous cars, which suggests that there are numerous families, sometimes in one house, which was designed for one family. So we have a problem in our community that we can look the other way if we choose to. Unfortunately, some of us have learned to make a great deal of money from poor people. So if there are 2 or 3 people who are willing to live in the house, we charge them as much as we can, and then we find somebody else. But we can do better. And I'm asking the voters of the city of Stamford to give us a chance to be the city that we should be. We talk about the city that works for everybody, but this charter revision will not make it possible for it to work for everybody. It will work for somebody's, but not everybody. The people I'm talking about that live in those houses can't even sign a petition in the city of Stamford. They won't be able to sign it whether we vote yes or no, but it does give us a chance to go back to the drawing board and not live with it for another 10 years.
And Reverend Hill brought up a great point about us needing to have the tools in place. And right now, the tools that we have in place is the composition of our land use boards. The way that those boards are composed is when the mayor nominates and the legislature approves. And in the event that the populace, us, disagree with the tools that are then in place, there's one person accountable, the mayor. And then we can vote that mayor out and get somebody else in with a brand new composition under those circumstances. What's being proposed here in this charter revision completely eviscerates that accountability by vesting or even giving the Board of Representatives the opportunity to make those decisions as to who to nominate to these boards. You incentivize these folks, us, to vote down who the mayor submits, and to then put somebody in place that the board didn't have the opportunity to do before. So in the event that the yes carries, and the Board of Representatives is empowered with appointing folks to our land use boards, we can't hold them accountable. By definition, we each have 2 representatives. That means that there are 38 other folks who are responsible for making citywide land use decisions over whom we have no ability to influence. That's exactly why we have the policy in place. That is exactly why the mayor's constituency is the city as a whole, and why a 40-member legislature with citizens with constituency for their respective districts should not be given the power that's being proposed here.
All right. So we've got 2 questions. That's the end of the question. And our host pastor says that is the end of the questions. So question number 1, and this should be a quick one, and I think I know the person who's going to grab the microphone down on the end and answer this. What is the conversion amount for each BMR apartment to dollars going to fee and lieu? See?
It's about $250,000 per unit. It's more if it's larger, it's less if it's small.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is the last question. All right, here we go. Because we're talking so deeply and passionately about whether we should vote yes or no to the charter revision, what are some of the issues that weren't addressed that should be? All right, don't everybody jump up at once.
No, again, that's why some of us have asked for more time, because we really have to go through it. Knowledge is power. And the last time that I had a discussion with the committee, and I'm glad the committee gave us the opportunity, it was about a 2 or 3 hour session. A lot of people spoke, but we honestly left the meeting with the feeling that we had not been heard. Because when I raised the question, the response I got from the leadership was that we received a whole lot more emails after you finished, and they were of a different opinion than you. Those emails were not shared in our public meeting, and I think democracy is saved by transparency.
There's actually a list of proposals that were submitted to the Board of Representatives and to the Charter Commission of some ideas that should potentially be implemented and then left to the voters to decide, that were left on the cutting room floor. I know because I submitted several of them. They include reducing the Board of Representatives from 40 members to 20. It also would have proposed that, as opposed to the current practice where you can vote for both the reps every 4 years, that you bifurcate it. So every 2 years, you vote for 1 or 2 reps to increase accountability, transparency, and engagement. I believe that the Charter Commission interviewed the current mayor and the previous 3 mayors, all of whom gave various proposals of how they think that the charter should be amended, none of which are currently proposed on the ballot now. So those are the only examples that I can think about now, Reverend, but there is a laundry list. And guys, over 100? The city is far from perfect. That's a given. But what's being proposed here, that's not the cure. What's being proposed here is going to, in my view, make things worse. And yeah, there are some good proposals in here. But the fact that I'm limited to a single all or nothing absolute vote of yes or no, there's just too much harm here that subsumes the good to such a degree. The only choice I have is to vote no.
Well, once again, I would thank all of the members of the commission that served and gave their time to bring forward this particular document. I think that knowing some of them as friends over the years, in questioning why they were concerned that people had showed up to say, we're not in favor of many of the items that you placed there, that many of them, I think, felt personally hurt. But government is about doing what's right for everyone. And that in some instances, you know, we may have different opinions about it. It's not personal, but it's about what democracy should be about. And in this particular instance, the idea of bringing forth documents that said that we all needed to vote once on 9 different items just seems to be patently unfair. The idea of demanding that we rush to vote seems to be patently unfair when it was not necessary to do. And members of that commission, I led the NAACP here in Stamford years ago, and I'm quite possessive of it and what it has been able to do. But I'm concerned that a civil rights organization that I hold dear would knowingly put forward a session where it did not provide the education and impartiality for both sides to negotiate this particular issue. Using the imprimatur of that great organization to do that lacks a certain amount of integrity. And when questioned about it, what we heard back was that, well, how do you know that there were other people or that the folks on the panel that presented at the Ferguson Library were only proponents of the document and that none of the others were there? And I shared with that leadership that over 100 people spoke up, and at least 80 of them were saying no at that time. Any of those individuals would have been wonderful speakers to join them at the Ferguson during that first event. So what are they hiding? Why are they doing it that way? And when I say what are they hiding, I'm talking about those people who are saying, let's push this forward. This is not about feelings. This is about government. This is about how we want to manage the city going forward. The devil is in the details, and to give us this nice apple pie question when the idea here is that the information is located elsewhere and that people are not getting that information, not getting that understanding, we can actually have true discussion and information sessions that allow the public to understand this and to make a decision about it. And that's what we want. But failing that, what's before us now is yes or no, and the vote should be no, quite clearly.
So, as we hurry to an end tonight, what we want to be able to do is offer each one of our panelists an opportunity briefly to give any closing thought, comment, your view, your feeling toward the charter as it is currently written and presented for us here in November. And I'll start with the lady first.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone in the audience for the thoughtful questions that were presented this evening. I'm a no. I mean, I've stated that. I've been that way pretty much since day one, and you know, for the 2 reasons I stated before. When I look back at the history of the Charter Revision Commissions, and I look at the votes, and most of them, the Board of Representatives were unanimous. This is obviously different. But when I look at the questions, when they listed the questions individually, and they gave the public information, most of the questions passed. They were yes. And I often think that it's very unfair the way that it's being done now. And if we give the public the information that they need, then maybe a lot of these things would pass individually on their own. I would have voted for some of these individually on their own. But in one question, when there's misleading points in the question, I cannot vote for it the way it is. I don't think it's transparent. There are things that are not listed, as many of us have said, and it's not straightforward. So without all of that, and I don't think 18% of the voters who are going to show up on November 7th should dictate what happens to the city in the next 10 years, for the next 10 years. I think it should have been done in 2024. So those are my reasons that I am a no, and I'm happy to talk to anybody individually. All of our names, or all of the board members' names and email addresses and phone numbers are on our website. So any of you who would like to reach out to your individual representative and ask them specific questions can do so. And I encourage you all to do that if you have any specific questions. And thank you to everyone and all the reverends for hosting, and thank you for your time this evening.
We certainly covered a lot of ground tonight, but even the specific discussions, and I really appreciate the discussions on affordable housing, this is about yes or no on a single omnibus question with 9 points that are anywhere from unclear to untrue. I don't like that we have broken with past precedent going back 4 to 5 decades. Each one of us should have had the opportunity to vote on each of these items individually and have information at hand at the time. One of the points that I didn't get to speak of before, and I'll cover just for 30 seconds, requiring certain members of the city government, the police chief, the fire chief, director of operations, director of public safety, and 4 more, they must live in Stamford. I want the best people for the job, not the best people who happen to live here. When we cast a net looking for someone to hire, there are some who might otherwise want to live in this area, but not Stamford for whatever personal reason. They won't apply for the job potentially. It also says if someone accepts the job, they have 6 months within which they must relocate, or the job, per the charter revision, will be declared vacant. You're fired. People have trouble selling their homes at times. Sometimes you got family issues. You can't uproot your family. A myriad of reasons. I want the best people working for the good of our city, not just the best people we can find who might be interested who already live here. There are too many devils in too many details and too much that has been omitted, and I find it, as I said at the opening, I find it an insult to the voters of Stamford to have one question with so many parts that are not clear, that are misleading, that represent 117 pages of changes and rewrites in our charter. I urge everyone to vote no on November 7th. Let's look at what we got. We have a 9-paragraph, vaguely worded, at best, single yes or no question to accept or reject hundreds of proposed changes. Being done in a year that is, at best, inconsistent with the expressed intention of our charter, and is at worst, illegal. I mean, those are the reasons why the League of Women Voters encourages us all to vote no, because this action is inconsistent with their core values of maximizing voter education and voter participation. We already talked about substantively one of the 2 issues that I have regarding appointments and allowing the Board of Representatives, the legislature, to get the unprecedented ability to nominate, which I just believe is terrible public policy. Didn't get too much time to talk about the other issue I have, which is to make it easier to hire lawyers and to potentially hire our own law department. Reverend, you asked questions before about taxpayer money being utilized and wasted. Well, I submit that this is one of them. And I'm not just talking about the salaries that we're going to have to pay these new people. Thank you, Representative Morrison, is going unchecked. I mean, we have a system in place where you have 3 different entities overseeing your pocketbook: the mayor, the Board of Finance, Board of Representatives. Nothing here about the fact that the Board of Representatives is in control of its own financial destiny. It's easy to gamble when you're playing with house money, guys. Not just the costs associated with the salaries. I'm worried about the exposure to litigation. when you have competing law departments in the same city, because one of the things that the charter doesn't do is end corporation counsel's representation of the Board of Representatives. So if this passes, the Board of Representatives could be represented by corporation counsel, the Board of Representatives Law Department, and outside counsel, 3 lawyers all at once. The potential exposure to litigation in and of itself is prohibitive, not from a cost standpoint, but from a governmental functioning standpoint. It will grind city government to a halt, and that's no exaggeration. So when you hear the opposition, the Yes campaign, who, one of their justifications for it, well, what I'm hearing is ad hominem personal attacks. I'm hearing, well, you must be in the pocket of a developer, or you must come from a rich side of town. The arguments in favor of the charter changes have been, at best, inconsistent. And when your arguments are inconsistent, that affects your credibility. And when your credibility is implicated, I question your motivations. And once your motivations are put in dispute, I cannot support your policy proposals. And when I have to do it all in the context of a single vote within a course of months with this language, my answer is no.
Representative Jacobson, I would remind you that within the Board of Reps that it's inappropriate for a member to impugn the motivations of another member. You've been called out on that many times before, and others in this audience. But when we talk about motivations, I think back to an op-ed piece that said clearly that people were liars, and that was written by someone who's probably used the issue of motivations as a big item during Board of Reps meetings. Why I mention that is that Maya Angelou, and many of you are aware of the quote that she said, that when people tell you who they are, when they show you who they are, when they do those things that show who they are, then you need to believe them the first time. And so what we're hearing and what we're seeing and what they're doing from one perspective has shown us over time, whether it's about voting no on housing, whether it's about attempting to put together this Byzantine 9-part question as a way of obfuscation to get people to vote for that one or two things that they want. I find it a despicable act, as I said before. I believe that all of us, if we truly believe in democracy, if we truly believe in participation, if we truly trust the public, as some others have said, then we need to trust that we can understand all 9 parts of this and tell us what is the detail behind it, which they've already written, but why can't we have information sessions that share that information with everyone else? I feel as though this is one of those legal contracts where there's some wording up top, but boy, when I get into it, I find out that I've given away all of my rights. We cannot trust Stamford to this. That's it. We cannot trust Stamford to this. Buyer beware, caveat emptor. We need to have another conversation, many more, about what's enclosed in this document. And so voting no on November 7th is the thing that we're advising all of our citizenry to do. Thank you.
Well, I'm concerned about all the citizens of Stamford, and among those are the poorest, the people who would like to have a home but can't afford one. I think we ought to be inclusive in our government. We can't have other people represent them. In this city, we have people who are on the Board of Representatives who live in affordable housing. They cannot sign a petition. That makes no sense. And I think this ought to go back to the committee to be rethought and reworked and brought back in 2 years I think the city of Stamford is better than this. We ought to reach for our best and not be satisfied to wallow in the mud. We ought to also be sure to pay attention to data. All kinds of rumors are out there. When you tell me something, I go and check it. I do the research. Because someone told me that the median income of Stamford was not what I had been told it was, that we were mixed in with Greenwich and Darien, but I found out we're not. It's a Stamford number. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that in Stamford there are some people who are neighbors who do not earn the same amount of money as others, and we have to be their voice. Because poor people don't have a voice. When they come and they try to get, I was part of the conversation in my neighborhood about affordable housing in Glenbrook. And they were my neighbors. I knew them. They knew me. But their reasons for not having affordable housing were hollow. They just didn't want it because somebody told them of all the negative things that would happen, and they didn't do the research. A vibrant community is a benefit to everybody. And I'm voting no because I think the community is better than this. I think Stamford is better than this. Thank you.
Thank you again to the Reverends and Faith Baptist for hosting this event. I want to touch on one specific items quickly and then more generally. Representative Jacobson mentioned the power to hire outside counsel and experts and consultants, that it's going to become dramatically easier. Essentially, the Board of Reps will be able to hire outside counsel, experts, and consultants for essentially any reason with no budgetary check. As much as they want to spend, they present the bills to the city, and the bills have to get paid. So the mind really wanders to think how this power could be used. The reason it's so difficult right now in the charter for the Board of Reps to hire outside counsel is because it's an awesome power to be able to hire lawyers. We see how lawyers are used in our various branches of government, and Representative Jacobson alluded to potential legal conflicts. There could be lawsuits filed by the Board of Reps against other boards, other individuals inside government, and it's a pretty scary thought, to tell you the truth. Aside from the budgetary impact, which I think could be significant, but let's set that aside for a second, just the power to be the only branch of government that can hire legal counsel with no budgetary check is a pretty scary thought. So I just want to close. There's been some pretty hot rhetoric used by the proponents of the charter revision. This is a quote from the majority leader of the Board of Reps. Quote, "This charter revision has been very controversial because change means controversy, and the people who don't want change are pushing back because they have a lot of power and they don't want to change the charter." So what that means is that if you are opposed to the changes, your opposition is purely in your own self-interest to protect your own power. So, first of all, 3 of the members of this panel who are opposed are members of the Board of Representatives, which will be gaining more power. This quote is an acknowledgement that the proposed charter revisions are a significant shift in power from the mayor to the Board of Representatives. That's what it's tacitly saying. So 3 of the members of the Board of Representatives are saying, we don't want the power. So that can't possibly be their motivation. And I think Reverend Hyman and Reverend Hill would be amused to find out that the only reason that they're up here this evening speaking to you, or me for that matter, is because we're here to protect our own power. That is a disservice to the people who are opposed to charter revision, and for all the reasons that have been stated quite eloquently this evening, I will be voting no, and I urge everyone in earshot to vote no as well. Thank you.
So tonight, before we leave, let us hear back from our host pastor of this, the great Faith Tabernacle Baptist Church, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Ford. Let me thank Pastor Bradley for moderating. He has done a marvelous job on today. I would be remiss if I did not represent the other board of representatives from the board here. Would you just please stand so that we may recognize you? Thank you for your time coming out. And then Pastor Jackson is in the back. Amen. We thank Pastor Jackson on Monday. Pastor Jackson held a community conversation at Bethel Baptist Church. I think it is important that you see the pastors in this community. We're not here because this benefits us at all, but we want to see what's best for our community. And frankly, it concerns me. It concerns me when you look at item number G. Earlier this year, may have been last year, there was a seat open for the Board of Education. Now, the Democratic nominee is in this room right now. It was Janine Burke. I stayed on the phone because they did not have, you were not able to sit in person in the meeting. But I stayed on the phone for hours to convey my sentiments who I would like voted. And caller after caller did the same thing. And they all said, listen, Janine Burke is the Democratic nominee. This is who we want. And after hours of listening to what the people had said, the Board of Representatives, led by Reform Stamford, voted the way they wanted to vote. Not what the people said, but the way they wanted to vote. They disregarded our vote. They disregarded what we had said. And so, you know, you have to really look at it. I was looking at the comments, and Representative Bonnie Campbell said that this is David and Goliath, that it should be one vote, one person. Well, they've already showed us, based on the Board of Education, that it doesn't matter how you vote, as long as they're able to vote the way they want. Listen, it's important that you come out and vote on November 7th, because on November 7th will give us the trajectory for the next 10 years. And the question is, do you want a group of folk in there that wants to do whatever they want to do? Or do you want them to be held responsible? Listen, I'm done, but as I go to my seat, remember, this isn't just for you, but we're forming a Stamford for your children and your children's children. And the question is, do you want your children to have a voice? Or are you fine with just going along with status quo? I don't know about you, but I want to make Stamford a better Stamford. No, I would not vote everything in this charter. Some things I would vote yes for. But the bigger things, the things that will have an impact on us for years to come, in good conscience, I cannot vote yes for. And so that for that reason, my answer is a no. Listen, I hope that you've enjoyed yourself on today. Thank you for coming out on today. Let me say this, an educated and informed voter is an empowered voter. With that being said, let me say on November 2nd, Tuesday, November 2nd, we will have a... No, I'm doing something else. On Tuesday, November 2nd, from 6 to 8 p.m., Faith Tabernacle, the Concerned Clergy, along with a number of other partners, donors, and a number of other partners, have partnered to do a Board of Education forum right here at Faith Tabernacle from 6 to 8 p.m. Come out and be a part of it. Every candidate that is on the ballot will be here, and you will be able to hear personally their point of view. Amen?
That's a Thursday.
That's a Thursday, yes. Did I say Tuesday? I'm so... All right, Thursday, let me say this again. Board of Education Forum, this Thursday, November 2nd, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. right here at Faith Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church. If you cannot be here live, it will be streaming on our Facebook page and YouTube page, all right? I think that's it. Thank you again. We're dismissed.
I wrote a note. There's an op-ed document. Somebody else. Really?
I just say someone told me you believe me. You did participate. When you I feel that I'm being okay, go ahead. My neighbor came at 10, so I recorded it. Yeah,
What you said about we don't. The last thing said it's a waiver. The Board of Reps and the last thing they waiver. And I agree with it. The people who brought this up, specifically, over grant writing,
yes, sir.
it's the fact that it looked at, it talked about situations where people did not comply. So if the waiver provision is still there, it should be a non-issue.
You're right, a non-issue.